Latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan, and this evening we are going to look at the Artemis Accords that India signed last week during Narendra Modi's visit to the US. How will the Artemis Accords affect or influence India's space program? What are the benefits? What are the advantages it confers on us? These are some of the questions I'm going to put to our guests today. Joining us from the US is Dr. PG Diwakar, former scientific secretary to the Indian Space Research Organization. Dr. Diwakar, welcome, glad to have you.
Thank you.
We also have our own in-house editor of Interstellar, Chaitanya Giri. He's also a doctor, by the way. He's also a space scientist, and he's been active in the field for many years. Chaitanya, glad to have you again.
Happy to be here.
Dr. Diwakar, let's begin with you. The Artemis Accords, how do they help us? What is the advantage? What do we get?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. See, we should know that already 27 countries have signed an accord for Artemis, and India has also joined in. It will be the rich experience that ISRO and India really can take to this Artemis missions, because we should understand Artemis mission is going to be ultimately a long-standing mission and access to the entire solar system. So obviously, US does need a lot of international partners, and India is one very unique partner, which possibly will be able to take many things there. Basically, this all has happened because India's new space policy has enabled many things to happen in the country. And we today have a very interesting set of incubations and startups in the country, which can offer a lot of unique possibilities for this Artemis mission, basically. So India has ultimately sort of proved from its technological developments earlier. At the same time, today we have such kind of an environment where we have a lot of very interesting young minds working with the space technology. Particularly if you look at aerospace itself, there are huge number of startups and incubations. So I think we are in the right place, in the right time to sign this accord with Artemis mission, and I'm sure that India will be able to offer a lot.
So, if I were to ask you in specific terms, does it help the Gaganyaan program? And how?
Yes, in a way, yes. See, Gaganyaan, as we know, slightly got delayed due to the COVID-related issues. But today, Gaganyaan is again picked up. A lot of activities are happening. For example, already we have set up our own astronaut training center where astronauts are being trained. But we could certainly gain a lot if we can get access to US astronaut training center also, because it's a pretty well developed area. In addition to that, Gaganyaan does need a lot of other tools and technologies which possibly could help us, particularly when we are talking about taking our astronauts something like 400 kilometers into the orbit. It will be interesting for us to learn a lot from the ISS program, which almost is similar. And it will help us in understanding their technologies and take them further. Especially the way the Artemis program is shaping up. We have seen already Artemis 1, which has done a successful journey. They have interesting tools and technologies, particularly with respect to the Space Launch System, SLS, what they call. It is pretty interesting, and the Orion spacecraft, what they have, which they have tested, and it's going to be one of the important mainstays in the days to come. So the technologies for us to understand, both with respect to SLS, the Orion, and also the interesting propulsion system, the interim cryogenic propulsion system, what they have, ICPS, it will be interesting because they are using it for something like a two-stage or two-step to go to the moon. These are some very interesting technologies which we can learn from. But of course, when we are looking at Gaganyaan, the objective here is to initially take uh, our crew module up to something like 400-kilometer orbit. But India does have also a program in future to build its own ISS kind of a station. So there's a lot of learning, not only near Earth orbit, but even for what do you call deep space missions, particularly. There's a lot of learning for India. Yeah.
Chaitanya Giri, you've been writing about the Artemis Accords for some time, and explain to us, because from what I am understanding from reading your writings and reading many others, and also talking to people in government, there was a lot of skepticism initially about these accords. That somehow it was a kind of, maybe some kind of Cold War mentality. We don't know. Give us that sense of what the issues were with Artemis.
The skepticism came from our experiences in the history. Back in the days during the
Yeah.
Cold War, when the two space factions were created, the then Soviet Union, they initiated something known as the Intercosmos program, where they gathered countries from the Comecon group. They gathered some partners outside the Comecon group, especially India, France, and a few others in South America. And they had ferried some of the astronauts from these countries to their space station. So, if you remember the entire episode with our very own cosmonaut, Rakesh Sharma ji, you'll find that this was part of
Yeah.
Intercosmos, and we did not join back then the Apollo. Now, whether we have agreed to join a US-led bloc by signing Artemis, now that has to be contested, or that narrative has to be contested, because number one, back in the days when India chose to go into the Intercosmos, we were just taking baby steps with our space program. None of our launch vehicles had gotten the space proven tag. Satellites were just beginning to go up there in the orbits, and we were taking baby steps. We were not doing any interplanetary missions. Cut to, we come to this day, and today we find that we have a natural inclination of working with almost every country from both the blocks. And when I say both the blocks, you have the Artemis Accords and the group of countries in there who are signatories to this agreement. And then you have a challenging agreement, or a competing agreement, which is known as the International Lunar Research Station, which is initiated by China and Russia. Now, given the fact that India is part of the Security Quadrilateral at one end, and also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it is very likely that we could also have the flexibility of working with both the initiatives, interplanetary exploration initiatives. Now, we have to do that because number one, India does not want to create any acrimony of sorts while it explores outer space. Outer space exploration is in the interest of humankind. Outer space exploration is to keep the scientific spirit, and exploration per se is a humongous enterprise. It is not possible for any one country to execute it by itself. And that's the very reason that the US has now foregone its idea of doing it all alone, as it did during the Apollo. If I may give you just a brief anecdote of history, during the Apollo program in 1966, US was spending nearly 4% of its GDP on the Apollo program. Now, you can't make that kind of humongous investments over a sustained period of time. And that's the reason why
Yeah.
all the countries that are part of something known as the International Space Exploration Coordination Group, the ISRO CEG, they have decided that let's pool in resources, let's pool in technical, human, as well as monetary resources, and go out in outer space and reap benefits out of it. So, benefits through extraction of natural resources, benefits through creation of technology spin offs, and creating space exploration into not only a scientific enterprise but also an economic enterprise. So, there are money tags now being assigned to lunar exploration. Some estimates say that lunar exploration in the next 10-15 years could generate revenues of around $50 billion or so. So countries naturally would want to, go out in outer space uh, with friends, with countries with whom they share technology platforms. They have certain amount of interoperability when it comes to technologies, and where people to people connect is strong. Now, unfortunately, we do not have great scientific people to people connect with the Chinese ecosystem. We have grown in isolation with each other. Our relations with Russia have been headstrong.
Yeah.
The scientific cooperation has dwindled over the decades. At this point in time, it is the US with whom we share scientific cooperation, economic cooperation. There is a diaspora to diaspora linkages, and all these, sort of, comes together very well when we sign the Artemis Accords. And what I felt was, more than India, it was the United States that was very happy that we've joined it. So we have a lot to offer, we have a lot to give in the coming years to the Artemis initiative, and we want to be equal partners. We don't want to take diktats, and we can deliver.
Okay, Doctor, how do I mean when we look at India's technology? A lot of it is homegrown, home built. You know it. You've worked in ISRO for so many years. How do we measure up to say what the Chinese are doing? The Americans, they are way way ahead. But say when we compare us to the Chinese, where are we?
Um, yeah, when we really compare ourselves with either Chinese or Russians or US, we still need to do a lot of catch up. There are certain areas where we have done very well, considering the economic condition of our country right from the independence up to the time where we have grown now. Whatever we have achieved has
Yeah.
been significant, I would say, for a country like India, which today is highly the most populated country in the world. But certainly, China has gone way ahead because many of the areas where China has accomplished is pretty significant. It could be having their own space station, the launch vehicle capabilities, the heavy lift off engines, what they have, the kind of satellites what they are able to launch, and many other areas. But one particular area I would say where India has really scored over not only China but many other countries is applications of space technology and taking it to the grassroots and literally reaching out to the last mile. That is an area where India has done very significantly compared to any other country. Even possibly China wouldn't have reached the level what India has reached, because today we talk about sustainable development or literally looking at the condition of water, condition of land. We can reach out to the farmer using a combination of technologies like the space-based technology, the Internet of Things, as well as the drone technology. So we use a combination of these things to reach out. These kind of tools and technologies, what we have done, and also the kind of space-based monitoring of our programs, like there is a lot of amount of money which is being spent by the government for varieties of developmental programs. For example, you can take uh, MG Narega, for example. Such kind of programs we are able to monitor from space. So space applications is one area where
Uh-huh.
possibly India is second to none, but there are many other areas where India needs to really catch up. But we are not far off. For example, the way we are now looking at our LVM3 and the way it is shaping up, and the way we are now working on semi-cryo engine and the technologies related to that, and also the kind of what do you call launches which we are going to very soon see. It could be Aditya L1, It could be Chandrayaan 3, and we work very closely with Japan for yet another Chandrayaan mission. These are going to be unique examples of how India can uh, easily reach out to that level of technology and really make a big dent on the ground. So we are not very far catching up, but certainly there is a lot of catching up to be done by India as far as China is concerned, to be very specific.
The Chinese effort largely their own? Was somebody helping them? Perhaps the Russians? Did they steal stuff from this way? How do they do this?
That's a question for me.
Yeah, Doctor. Diwakar, you.
See, it's very difficult to say. This is a little bit of a question which is either way. I'm sure Chaitanya will have more information on this. But as I understand, they have certainly learned a lot, working very closely with US and other countries. It's not completely homegrown as I see it. But uh, the way they have learned is a difficult thing to talk about. But certainly they have learned from others. But today they have mastered those technologies. It's something like reverse engineering. For example, if you talk about, a lot of reverse engineering has been done over a particular period of time, and they have achieved a set of technologies which are pretty interesting. But they have not just learned from others, but they have also put in a lot of their efforts to further make it happen on the ground. And today they are possibly one of the uh, top space powers, I would say.
Chaitanya, would you also like to put your give your input there for the Chinese?
Yeah, sure. With the Chinese, they've put in concerted efforts over the past 40 years or so, starting with something known as Program 863. This was initiated by Deng Xiaoping, and in this 863 program, which started in 1986, March of 1986, that's why the number 863. Uh, uh, they initiated their space program in a grander way than it was prior to that. So they had set out really meticulous plans for human space flight, meticulous plans for interplanetary exploration, and whatever wherewithal and gadgetry that these ambitions needed. So it came with concerted efforts. Wherever they thought uh, they are unable to procure technology in a quick succession, they've used reverse engineering, beg, borrow, steal, and something that is known in China as the 16 character policy, where it is just an Indian equivalent of Samdam Dandabhed with some chori in it. So they've done that, and today you see the impact of it is that number one, they are quite self-sufficient when it comes to paraphernalia. So they have full spectrum capabilities in astronomy, in human space flight, in planetary exploration, in Martian exploration, lunar exploration. They study the geomagnetic fields of the Earth quite meticulously. They have really deep engagements in Europe, although the Americans don't work with the Chinese directly because of something known as the Wolf Amendment, which is the China exclusion policy of NASA. But the Chinese, even to this day, despite the geopolitical acrimony, work with the National Science Foundation of the United States very closely. So the Chinese Academy of Sciences, one of the key stakeholders of the Chinese space program, is also one of the strongest partners of the National Science Foundation. So, and these engagements or linkages cannot be severed because number one,
Yeah.
there is massive Chinese diaspora in American universities, and this diaspora not only sort of contributes to the American space program or American scientific engagements, but some of them also train a lot of Chinese PhD and postdocs who come to their labs and they send them back. So there's a lot of training that is happening in the United States, run by uh, maybe Chinese origin Americans or Chinese nationals who are full professors there, and they sent back the brightest students to the Chinese universities. So they have taken concerted efforts. As Dr. Diwakar said, we in all these years focused a lot on socioeconomic applications because there was internal domestic political compulsion to keep the space program that way. We did not fantasize of having a really advanced space program that would give economic returns. But in the past 10, 15 years, since the rampant commercialization of the space enterprise and the proliferation of social media, we know the new heroes of the young ones. So they see the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and the Rocket Labs and all these startups who have done exceedingly well. We see them as icons. Our space startups want to learn from them, if not emulate them, and take the next step ahead. And that's the reason why we have taken this initiative of joining Artemis, because we really do know that going to the moon is not a solitary enterprise for us. We have to join hands with international partners.
Dr. Diwakar, space technologies, most critical technologies are very jealously guarded. Nobody lets on, nobody gives it away. And does the Artemis Accords suggest that some will be given to us, some may be shared in some form, however limited, or is something that we will experience as we get into it and then learn from that?
Yeah, it's too early to really say whether something will be given to us. We need to really wait and watch, but certainly there is a lot to gain when we start working with them. See, for example, very soon we are going to launch this NISAR satellite. NISAR is a very unique satellite jointly built by NASA and ISRO, and the kind of learning that has happened in realizing the spacecraft, the various components of the spacecraft by both the teams, both ISRO team as well as the US, the NASA team. It is a very unique experience for us. Both of us have learned a lot, and there is a big gain for both the teams. So similarly, I expect in Artemis, and the of course Artemis is going to be a series of launches, and it's going to be a long-standing mission. As I told earlier, there is a lot of technologies to be developed, and US alone will find it extremely difficult to do, because we are talking about building a gateway in the orbit for getting into the moon or getting out of the moon.
Mhm.
And this is going to be an interesting exercise where we will possibly from there get into different other deep space missions. For example, if we are going to talk about going to explore other planets like Mars and all, it's always necessary for us to create a base. So creating a base and creating a gateway in orbit at at the moon is going to be a unique learning for many of our teams. And especially, I expect a lot of these startups and private industry in India, which is shaping up so well, to get an opportunity to work with them on this. But there are many other things which we will be able to learn. So for example, India very soon is going to launch its unique uh, experiment of SpadeX. SpadeX is nothing but the docking experiment which we are going to do in space. That means you will have two objects in space, and we will be controlling it from the ground, and they will dock with each other, and it will become a unique example of how you can increment the first orbiter with the second orbiter and put them into a bigger engine to deliver much better. Similarly, in the Artemis mission, there's going to be a lot of docking and undocking experiment which we will be doing as part of the Artemis program. So
Mhm.
India will be demonstrating the SpadeX now very soon, and possibly we can improvise on the SpadeX program by learning a lot, working with Artemis, its own docking and undocking experiments that will be done. So similarly, there are many other exercises that will be done, which ISRO will be able to, ISRO and also the private industry will be able to gain a lot of experience from this. For example, the other area which I can think in my mind is the deep space network. India has its own deep space network, but for the kind of long-standing deep space network which will be required in the future, there will be a lot of possibilities again to work together to not only create more deep space network, possibly in some other place in India, but also elsewhere in the world, because this will be very necessary if you want to be continuously monitoring what happens to the deep space missions. Because when astronauts set out for very long journey, possibly to the edge of the solar system one fine day, you will need a very powerful deep space network. So I am sure there will be a lot of technology exchanges and gain for India, particularly when we start working on such kind of things. Robotics is another area where we will be again exposed to very unique activities and exercises. Again, there is a huge opportunity for uh, Indian youngsters to put their hands in and learn a lot. So when we bring in robotics, obviously astronauts are going to go. Robotics missions will be there in the Artemis mission, which will be a tremendous learning. And automatically, when we talk about robotics, artificial intelligence also plays a very major role here. So youngsters with the kind of activities what ISRO does and what the other startups and private industry is doing in India today will have a huge opportunity. So Artemis Accord, the way it is signed today, is actually going to open up a whole lot of new learning and new ways of looking at space, particularly when we look at a permanent deep space solar exploration system. I think this is going to be a very, very good learning for us.
Interesting. Chaitanya, um, the Artemis Accords, and you were telling me about the Chinese also with a very ambitious and very far-reaching space program. Are we looking at a kind of a division in the space order, one driven by the US with a lot of others along with it, another by China, maybe with Russia?
Uh, it appears that way in some sense, and in some sense, there are entities who are also trying their best to not let uh, the bipolar division happen. So I'll give you an example. So apart from India, there are 26 other signatories. Some of them space capable with a plethora of capacities. Some of them are less space capable. They're just beginning, but they've taken their stances. So let's say, for instance, the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates has a fairly recent space program. They just started in the 2013 or
Yeah.
2014, uh, and they've taken great steps. They've been to the moon recently. They've been to Mars, and the program is ambitious. They've signed the Artemis Accords, yet at the same time, they're also part of the International Lunar Research Station. So the next time they go to the moon, they're going with the Chinese, despite being Artemis signatories. Another example is
Okay.
France. So if you hear out the French space community, uh, they are right now in two minds. So some of them are quite keen to join Artemis and work with the entire Artemis network, while some of them are keen to work with the Chinese. And a large chunk of both these groups have one common goal: not to let go the French strategic autonomy in outer space. Now, if you look again at history, there have been three main space powers. One is definitely the US, the other one is Russia, which inherited the Soviet architecture, and the third one is France. France, for a very long time, had heavy lift capacities. Some of our satellites, as Dr. Diwakar would agree, were launched from French Guiana through Ariane rockets. But what has happened is over dependence on the United States has sort of pushed back European capacities, and European players right now are cribbling that they really want to get the best game back, their best game back. and for that they are banking on autonomy. So players like France and Germany would also eventually try to come to a middle ground where they would work with the Artemis teams as well as with the International Lunar Research Station, and that's the way to go. You know, I'll give you again an example of Intercosmos. So when Indian cosmonauts were flying on Russian space stations, even the French had
Agreed, yeah.
joined back in time. Yeah, yeah, despite being part of NATO. So that's
Yeah.
the beauty. Even the Russians, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the first thing that they did was create a sort of a detente, create some sort of a friendship with the Americans, and the product of that friendship is the International Space Station. You know, there were a few years in between when the Americans were not launching their astronauts, they were not sending logistics from their land. It was the Soyuz rocket which was carrying American astronauts. So,
Mhm.
you know, things have gone sour again. But if the Russians and Americans can work together, why not the others? So there are quite a few possibilities. I don't think we should take sides, and this has always been my stance. And this is what I have been advocating. Don't take sides. Do whatever is of interest to India.
Yeah, well taken. I have a pile of questions, but we are completely out of time. And I have to Dr. Diwakar, Chaitanya Giri, great talking to you. And hopefully, we'll come back to another maybe a month or two down the line. Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was nice.
And for those of you who followed us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media and Twitter. Thank you very much. Good night.